So great. So thank you for all the insights we had so far. So now we are privileged to act as a moderator for this panel discussion on showcasing initiatives from different UBRI members. So I'm delighted to have very senior academics with us today. And the purpose of this panel is really to kind of share our your insights on successful as well as less successful initiatives. So basically, what has worked and what has not worked, along with the recent trends that you see emerging from your region, because we have representatives from Switzerland, from Portugal, from Spain, and also from California. So we're also going to see the differences in the US versus Europe. Finally, try to talk about some strategies that were helpful in stimulating student engagement. We talked about already entrepreneurship, but we're trying to touch upon entrepreneurship as well. How can we stimulate entrepreneurship? And finally, how can we keep meaningful partnerships with industry alive? So what is the ultimate aim? The ultimate aim is really to try to inform the discussion that we will have later in groups. So after this roundtable, we're going to have a discussion in groups to talk about actual initiatives that we can lead together based on what we discuss now. So those are really just trying to start our conversation for later. So without further ado, I will ask my panelists to briefly introduce themselves, and then we can start. Thank you. Please start.
Okay, all right. Okay, no, I'm good. Right? It's on? Oh, now it's on.
Yes.
Green means it's on. Red means it's not. Okay. Just when you're up here, please for information. Okay. All right, so Ikhlaq Sidhu, I'm the Dean of the School of Science and Technology at IE. Before that, 17 years at Berkeley. Started, running the Center for Entrepreneurship and Technology and a researcher in internet communications before that.
Hi, everyone. My name is Karin Bauer. I have led the UBRI partnership with UC Berkeley since 2018. The first 5 years were at the Haas School of Business, and then we moved into a new center. So I'm currently the Director of Industry Partnerships and Programs for the Center for Responsible Decentralized Intelligence, RDI.
I think I already did that.
That was quick. Leid Zejnilovic, and I am from Nova School of Business and Economics, where I founded, and I'm running Data Science Knowledge Center. And since about a year ago, I took over the UBRI partnership. It was kind of in an air, and then I said, okay, let's do something nice with it. And that's it.
Thank you. Perfect. So let's jump right into the discussion then. So we start with successful initiative versus less successful initiative, or initiative that did not meet the expectations of our expectations. So I would like to start with Ikhlaq and say, pick one initiative. What were the key factors that contributed to the success of such initiative? And sometimes it could also be an initiative that was successful in an unexpected way. So, for instance, we, with the UK CBT, we run a fintech challenge in collaboration with a startup, a blockchain startup, which tries to minimize online scams. So now, preventing online frauds is not exactly a very sexy topic, but it turned out to be incredibly successful among students. We had 70 students showing up the week after exams, so very motivated student. Probably was for the pizza. Pizza was included. I had to this caveat in. Pizza was included, but we had 70 students from computer science, even the arts. Vera was mentioning that earlier. Like a lot of students, they don't even know they like blockchain. Some of the students in the art shows up along students from math department, from computer science, and was very successful. So back to you, but if you can just tell us, pick one initiative that particularly successful or unexpectedly, or some that was less successful.
Okay, all right. First of all, I want to just thank you for organizing. He sent us exactly what it is that we had to respond to. That's why we all have notes here. We actually know what it is that we're supposed to answer. And so I'm going to do that now. Okay.
Organization is paramount here.
Yeah, exactly. So, so I say before you can talk about success, you have to talk about the goal. And when I was at Berkeley, the goal was teach students to be, entrepreneurial, innovative, give them leadership capabilities. And what we discovered there was that it was really about teaching them the psychology and the mindset, not about the tactical things. At IE, I'm doing a different thing. So the goal is different. So, it's not like you just have one thing. It depends on what you're trying to do. At IE, what I'm trying to do, or we are trying to do, is build a next generation polytechnic. And one that is entrepreneurial, one that is very industry connected, one that's really international. So it's kind of a different thing. On the topic of, I think, to some degree, what might be successful even in both, but I'll talk from the IE point of view for a minute here, given that context. I'll just, and I will stay in my time limit. Let me say what I think is not successful. In my opinion, it's research in isolation of connection into anything else. So if you just do research in the lab, you write the paper, and you're not getting it connected with any other things, maybe it's successful in some way, like if you happen to be Fourier or someone. But if you're not that, it tends to be like unsuccessful. And my model, has been to try to mix researchers and students and outside people, like just as much as possible, like in like different versions of it. And so, and that's one thing that we're doing with UBRI also is, we started with how can we fund some research that's connective across all the partners and so forth. But in our next step of it, we basically said, how can we also insert teaching? And so, researchers who are doing research and teaching programs, and those students who are in the teaching program can get connected or become a support to the research, like just ways that I can put these things together. It's remarkable how many university programs are out there that are either teaching or their research. They just, for whatever reason, naturally don't let them come together very easily. So that's just a message I have. And my example, just finally answering your question, is that one of these mixture models for us is Tech Venture Bootcamp, example of success, I guess. And and it's a little bit to motivation. My observation was like I wanted students to learn certain technical material as we are building this polytechnic. The answer on the motivation is it's the entrepreneurial part. So I tried it just like, we'll hold a lecture, we'll teach it in a class, but I tried it in entrepreneurial bootcamp where I said, you pick your idea, what you want to do, but we'll teach you the technical fundamentals so that you can employ them. And, basically it's their idea, but the technology. Like we'll teach you the technology, but you practice it with your ideas. And I think that motivator, it's possibly as strong as pizza and maybe, like a few other, high value things. So, because it's your idea, you're willing to learn a lot of things that you're not willing to learn otherwise. So that's my answer. It's the mixing and the motivating by something that's really your own.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. And you are absolutely spot on. So, Leid, following up with you for some of the less successful initiatives, perhaps. I know that
We got
because we had so many examples of the successful coming from Portugal that we need to hear about at least one which was less so.
It's very, very kind. The Portuguese technique.
Oh, you can.
It took time, it took time because we just started it. And maybe the approach that we took also tells a little bit about experience about lacking success. So when I took over the UBRI, I know that first as a professor in a public university, there's kind of also mixture, and everything for us is a bureaucracy. So whatever as a person you think, this is going to be fast, I'm going to do this and that, and then you start, and then you just say, wow, how can this be so complicated? It is impossible, but it exists. It's a paradox, and it's impossible to understand it, but you have to live it. So because it's as it is, me as a person who is also with entrepreneurial background, I think things are going fast and I'm going to do this and it's going to happen. And so I realized that I'm underestimating the complexity and overestimating my capabilities to do something. So then I said, I'm going to make a good team. But making a good team is very weird. And I think that's the least successful, right? What is weird? Because I was thinking, what is a good way to visualize it? Imagine formation skydiving. Do you know what it is?
Yes.
So people come down, And so that's how you build a team that supports initiatives like you. Because you have professors with their ideas, with their research, I don't know what. And I said, I'm going to bring a really cool entrepreneur who's going to come and kind of shake us up. Then I'm going to get some young people who are also going to do all these things. And what you do have is, and all of this, is we embarked on this project, we just jumped out of the plane. And then instead of all of us, jumping with our belly down and nicely going down, you see an entrepreneur going, bitch. And he's alone somewhere. He's doing things and nobody can assist him. And then he gets into this frustration. He says, but this is not going on like that. Just sign this. And I say, I cannot sign this stuff. A rector should sign this. Why should rector sign this? Because it's a procedure. So, and the frustration just grows up, it builds up, so you never have the momentum to continue. And the trick is that all these people kind of, with hands, touch themselves with a hand, and they're all together and falling down nicely where we should serve this multiple objectives. And multiple objectives is to have students that feel that they're supported, that feel that they're nurtured, to be part of this community, to have researchers that are attracted to continue investing efforts, and these entrepreneurs who are supposed to link us and translate these differences among entrepreneurs and academic world to just make it all kind of seamless. It's an ideal utopia, but it's still something that we're trying to build because previously we have had many errors in managing this multiple objectives with this.
That's so true. It's so true. I think it's a great analogy, and particularly, we can all, I think, as academics, we can all relate to your story. And what is interesting is that students do not necessarily see all this. We see that because we are behind the scenes, so we have to gain approval or whatnot. They don't see that. They only see initiatives on the ground and how those initiatives are being planned eventually. So, but for those who are there to make those initiatives happen, it's a real battle. It's a real challenge. It's a real challenge. Thank you so much. So moving on the engagement strategies, particularly those that resonate with students. So we'll come to Karin this time. So what type of events or activities do students find most engaging, particularly in your region? That could be very different. So we move from, we jump from Spain, Portugal, and now in California.
And now Bay Area, right. So the things that, this actually also relates to the question of what's successful and what's not successful in terms of initiatives that we pursue, because at Berkeley we're pretty fortunate to have a very strong student blockchain club. It's called Blockchain at Berkeley. It's got over 200 members, and they've been going since 2015 or 16 or so. They've been around a long time, so they have a robust leadership. And so I knew that it was important to develop a relationship with them and create programming that would be of interest to their membership. So the answer to the question of what engages them is not just learning for learning's sake. So, but that there's also a practical outcome, something that they can take with them into the market, because blockchain at Berkeley students are comprised primarily of undergraduates. They have 4 years in university, then they're out looking for work. But then it's also, there is also a subset of them who are master's students, either in master's in engineering, computer science, or even MBA students. And they have an even quicker trajectory into the workforce. So the initiatives that are successful that we've launched over the years have to do with programming, events, hackathons, workshops where there's a learning component, but then there's also connection to the industry partner, i.e. Ripple, or opportunities for them to leverage their learning and build a project that they can put on their resume and go out and talk about when they interview for a position, when they do job interviewing, and also actually initiatives that are successful that bring industry partners in to even come and recruit on campus. So I can get into more specifics on what those specific projects are, but let me stop there and ask you, is that sufficient in terms of answering the question?
Absolutely. And then we will come back because, now for a follow-up question for Thomas, I guess it's, do you see a difference, or would you tailor different initiatives in a different way based on the demographic of the students, such as if you have undergrads, or postgrad, or PhD, or MBA? So do you see a difference in those type of students demographics? And back to Karin's point, if your school is mostly composed by undergrads, so then obviously you tend to focus more on that. Or how do you see that in Zurich?
So I think it's important to look at also the cultural background that we have here. If you compare it to the US, like in Silicon Valley, and I was glad I could also spend some time there, some years, and I learned that this is a completely different way, right, how to approach that. Entrepreneurship here means you have some family money, used to start maybe something, but you do it in your own room, and building connections and really grow that is very hard, right? So. And that is also which is rooted in the universities here. So entrepreneurship is not something that is very famous here. So when I started my first course here in blockchain and in fintech, we specifically said we want the students to become entrepreneurs, because if you ask them, what do you want to do after you graduated? Well, then they said, well, there is UBS down there, there is Swiss Re down there. It's great to have a great paid job, right? But becoming a startup entrepreneur was not something that he wanted to do. And that changed now over the past years. We started to introduce a specific value chain for them. So we started classes, we started startup projects, where they really had to come up with their own concepts, with the ultimate goal to come up with their own startup, ultimately. They could receive funding for that, and now we have what is called the UZH Innovation Hub. So there is an own hub here where you can apply for. There is kind of a startup competition where you can pitch, and if you are getting in, you get funded, you get a network. So it's really great. And I think that journey is also something what you have probably in the US and specifically in Silicon Valley for many, many years, right? Because its roots date back to the Silicon.
And do you think implanting this infrastructure that you just mentioned, how do you think that implanting that in Switzerland or any other country in Europe was probably the right choice, because of perhaps culturally speaking, Switzerland is a bit more closer to the US in terms of entrepreneurship? Or coming from the US, how do you see that difference? So in setting up the infrastructure was difficult to these points before.
It was very difficult.
Fighting the current.
So especially here at the university, it was really a fight, I must say. And it was really fun because everybody, and that's what I appreciate what you said, research without making an impact is not worth something. And that was some years back, it was not so much a culture here, right? People tended to work in their ivory towers doing research for the sake of being published in some good journal, but not giving back something to create an impact in form of a startup, or in form of a cool idea. And I think that has changed now a little bit. Some still think it is the same way. Some others changed their mindset. That was also because of this UBRI partnership, because we had the possibility to really make it. And I think that was really good. So in terms of comparing,
would you say that with the right support, it is possible?
It is possible. However, you also have to say that Switzerland has an innovation background, because it is the #1 innovation country in the world, but it comes more from an incumbent innovation perspective, and not so much from creating startups. There is a little bit of biotech, yes, that's good. It primarily comes from pharma, but not so much from IT or other sectors.
So it's more like an incremental innovation rather than a disruption-based model, like in the California. That's fantastic. Thank you, Thomas. And back to talking about some of the specific topic Karin, you want to mention.
I'll give you a data point. Just to your comment, I think I think it's just worth saying this. David Teese at Berkeley, David, wrote a paper, and he found that professors who engage in entrepreneurship are more prolific in publication. And there's actually, it's like a long debate that was always used to go on in these universities. They say every time you work on your venture, you're taking away from the power in the building. You're taking away from what you're being paid to do. You're taking away from the university and the public and the mission and all that. But he found that actually the opposite was true, that they were producing more if they would be involved in ventures. And that's kind of like the mindset change that has to happen for the institution. I only wanted to support what you were saying.
Absolutely. That's great. That's great. Actually, thanks for that. I think it's important. And by the way, in the UK, just wanted to say 2 points. Number one, for those of you, students or PhD students, this will be the future. So even for you, continuing on down the path rather than doing pure research, yes, to focus on research, but also take into account that this is the way in which the new incentive structures for professors is going to be set up. So your impact is going to be as important, if not maybe even more important, than how many citations you get, or whether or not you publish in a certain journal. That could be something, a part of the future to take into account. And the UK on this, just want to add that the UK government is also working towards this direction. So in order for the new REF cycle, there's going to be, for those of you who don't know what REF is the way in which the mechanism in which the UK government rates universities. Impact is one of the big pillars of their new model. So that is to say. So we have, I think, please
I have a question. Because I feel working with entrepreneurs and working with researchers felt they have something in common, which is ownership. They have total ownership of their topic. They don't wait for anyone to give them a green light. Maybe they're director of research, but they're very independent in the way they can progress and move forward. How do you connect the researchers with the access to a real market? That's my good question.
Very good question. Anyone?
No, somebody else answer it.
I have an answer. I have one example. And this actually is thanks to Ripple's being open also to working with researchers. There's a student, he was his name is Danny Villardel, and he's with Cornell Tech, but he's also an RDI. So when we renewed our partnership with Ripple for UBRI, and placed it with RDI, we launched a new research fellowship program called Berkeley Frontier Research Fellows. So they're UBRI fellows, but So one of these fellows received funding from us for his work in ZKP. You'll actually be hearing from him tomorrow, I believe, Danny Villardel. I hope I'm pronouncing his name correctly. Anyway, so he was a student, Professor Dawn Songs. She is the faculty director of RDI. And Danny is working or made contact with the research team and developers at Ripple, and he's now collaborating with them on building out prototypes for his work. And again, I confess I don't know all the details, but the point is that you need a welcoming environment for that researcher to come in and be brought into the organization and to connect with a developer or a researcher resource and be sort of folded into their general development efforts as well. So in this case, he's actually a really great example of how that partnership works very effectively. He wins, the company wins, Ripple is winning, and all of us win because of the advancement that he's making in the research, in his research topic area that will benefit future product enhancements that Ripple is working on. So it's seamless. It's kind of actually effortless. It makes a logical sense. So what I was going to have said earlier, the one thing that we hadn't talked about in this entrepreneurship and research collaboration is you also need industry partners, right? You need that third leg of the stool because you need to have the demand, if you will. That's what also motivates a lot of researchers to step outside their silos. And because research is becoming more and more applied nowadays, there are people who do research for research's sake, but at least in the United States, from where I sit at UC Berkeley, I see more and more the interest among researchers to have their work mean something in the private sector. So does that help answer your question?
Not just that. I mean, I really love these roundtables because even this, which was not planned, my next point is stimulating entrepreneurship and dealing with local industry partners.
Oh, well, there we go.
Yeah, please go ahead.
But it's relatively simple, right? You have agent A, agent B. Agent A is a researcher. Agent B is the real world, right? So agent A has a view of the world, whichever it is. Agent B has their own view of the world, but they may need something or not. So the agent A needs to understand what the hell is that they need.
Yeah.
So they need some incentive to go and understand and then do something about it by adapting what they have. Now, how we incentivize that move, both physical and cognitive, to really going there and making sure that you address those needs, that's what we need to do. It should happen naturally, but researchers by design, not necessarily like people. Therefore, they're not necessarily, right? And so that's why they are there. And then they have to be stimulated to get out of their comfort zone.
And exactly on this, I actually have a question for you on that. So how do you establish and maintain productive relationship with local industry partners based on the fact that you may have researchers or group of researchers or leadership within your university, which may be a bit antisocial, if you put it in way, or not necessarily accommodating when it comes to relationship.
But they like the other people who don't like other people.
It's that confirmation bias that what you have is beautiful, but it just doesn't serve the market. Look, it's we're oversimplifying something that is per se complex, right? So you say, let's how to establish relationship with the local partners. Well, universities are there to, number one, do research, number two, do good education, right? And so why do you need these different partners? I'm gonna be a little bit rough when I say this. Well, first, you need them for money, so that you can do stuff that also maybe align with that. Then you need them to kind of understand, are we doing the right thing to actually make our students attractive for them, right? For them to find a job, because why you're doing education, because you want these people that are going through your system, your pipeline that you design, to actually be useful for somebody, hopefully. And that's what we don't want to do. So making those relationships is actually to kind of make sure that we are doing the right thing, however we define that right thing. In general, in a society, what is right thing is to make sure that we advance our society to be better in some way, to function better, solve problems, real world problems, and to kind of make sure that we live well.
And that is also a tangible outcome, right?
And let me just, I was thinking about that. And here is the thing. One of the things that I struggle the most, and especially when we talk about blockchain companies, look, they work in an unstructured environment, legal, market, the needs are not really well defined. And then you have students. By the way, Nova School of Business and Economics is one of the biggest German schools in the world. We have about 1.8 thousand Germans in our master programs today, like a really big German school. Now, Germans are very well defined. You know, this is what I'm going to do. This is my master thesis. And then you're talking with entrepreneurs who today, at the beginning, have one idea, but 1 month later, it's a completely different thesis. They're like, oh, this is not functioning. So one of the things is to make them flexible, to understand, to uncover the real need, although it's not necessarily well specified, and to be able to pivot really well while still completing what needs to be done. So if we can prepare, for example, master students, researchers, and the others to understand the complexity of such relationships, then we can create really good and functional relationships with local industry partners.
Excellent. Totally agree. That's really great. Thank you. And then, final question to wrap up this really insightful, very pleasant roundtable. Back to Ikhlaq. So, what strategies, particularly within the context of trying to foster a relationship with local industry partners, so what strategies have been effective to encourage students to pursue entrepreneurial paths? So, say something like mentorship programs or incubators or creating that infrastructure, which Thomas was mentioning before. How does that work from your standpoint? Also, because this is one of your main prerogatives, what you're doing with in Madrid, right?
All right. If I can, I'm going to take the opportunity this time to not answer your question.
I will allow it because you're being so well behaved that
if it's okay, I can come back and probably give you one sentence on this. But I just want to take a commercial break instead, on behalf of all of you, because you're all part of UBRI. And one thing that we're trying to do, basically, this is a plug. I hope you all come to Dubai on October 15th, okay? And we are...
I'll take the invitation.
You can hitchhike, you can get however you want. But we're trying to build that community of people for blockchain, for virtual asset regulation, to understand the research that we're all doing. So please come there. And to my last point, I'm very interested in not just a lab, but a lab that also does teaching. But if I extend that more, I wouldn't mind that one day we have a master's program and it could be collaborative with more than one institution. This is my one chance to talk to all of you in 10 seconds.
So which is the date?
October 15th. And the master's program can be anytime. Or we can work it out.
October 15th,
Dubai, that's right. Okay, and now your question. All right, and the question is basically how do you motivate students, or how do you get faculty motivated, or kind of maybe almost part of David's question. I think the best lead-in I can give you to that one is I just want you to have this one observation, that being a professor and being an entrepreneur, you have to be almost equally crazy in a certain way. Okay, if you think about it, like faculty go through all this effort so that they can do what they want to do instead of what somebody's telling them to do. And for that, they put in 10 times more work than anyone else would do. Well, that's what entrepreneurs do also. They, just to avoid doing what your boss or someone else is going to tell you to do, they will put 10 times the effort into something else and get paid almost nothing and go through all this. But it's really after that mindset of like the freedom. Like that's intellectual freedom or some other kind of freedom, but there's actually more in common between these two groups than you might realize. And the essence of that motivation comes from that. By the way, I did not have this written down. I was only observing it, through the conversation.
That's great.
And so I guess to end this, the answer to that, if you get the professors to have the right mindset actually about the way, what doesn't work is faculty do a research project, they do it for 5 years, they got a result, and then they say, I'm happy to talk to industry about what I've done. And industry's like, I don't really care about what you did these past 5 years because it doesn't match up with anything we're doing. You're already way too far off track. The only way that works is if you could have the mindset to invite people in early before you've decided what you want to do and actually listen to them. Like, oh, so that's what you're doing. I wonder if something I'm doing could be connected to me. You have to have that conversation much earlier. At the end, it's almost impossible to commercialize this thing. And I had this I invited Ian Stoica, another famous Berkeley person, frankly, who started Databricks, into a classroom that I had at one time. And he said that when he's starting his company, and there was a point where he had this mental realization that the customer knows better what they need than I do, but I know better how they could achieve that thing. And as long as you can keep those two apart, that you can't go to them and say, this is what you need. You have to actually shut up and just listen to them. They actually know better what they need, but you can still take the upper mental, position, but by saying, but I'm still going to know better than you how you could implement or have that thing happen.
Absolutely.
Anyway, that's my
No, that's great. Particularly, this idea of we tend to often in academia look at the past 5 years, kind of literature review sort of thing. While the industry is very much forward-looking into the next 5 years. So I guess this dichotomy needs to be addressed, and this is what your point is absolutely spot on. So I will just wrap up now. Thank you so much for the panelists. I mean, they've been fantastic. It was really, really pleasant to talk to you guys. And believe it or not, we made it in 35 minutes. So that is fantastic. Thank you so much.